You've probably never thought about it, but this past decade or so has arguably been the best time to be an anime fan. Think about it. Almost any anime you would want to watch is available instantly somewhere. Long gone are the days of being forced to buy overpriced DVDs containing only a small number of episodes, or having to trade VHS tapes just to hope what you get in return has legible subtitles. You don't even have to pay anything to legally stream anime for free. Now, we don't have everything, and we probably never will. But if you're an anime fan residing in the United States, you really do have enough content at your fingertips to last a few lifetimes. It really is hard to imagine a world without anime, even if you were around before the streaming era. As long as you had some disposable income, you could at least find something to rent at Blockbuster to fulfill your anime needs. Ever since the 90s, you can see that the strategy of buying up whatever licenses you can worked pretty well for the few anime distributors in the business. But there was a time when both companies and consumers were a lot more selective with their anime. Prior to the 90s, there was no anime industry per se in the US. At the time, it was cheaper to license a series from Japan and then reversion it for television than producing something from scratch. And this led to huge successes like Voltron and Robotech. However, with the small handful that successfully made it back then, there was an entire landfill of anime that companies attempted to bring over, but for one reason or another ended up being rejected. And in this video, I'll be taking a look at some of these unfortunately rejected anime. So in Japan, there's a little franchise called Dragon Ball. You've probably never heard of it, but it's surprisingly a bit popular over there, and the series creator, Akira Toriyama, is a household name. But before Dragon Ball's creation, he created a gag manga for Weekly Shonen Jump called Dr. Slump, which eventually got adapted into a TV anime by Toei, and it soon blew up in popularity, spawning a ton of merchandise and raking millions in revenue. It makes sense that companies would start to take notice of Dr. Slump and want to capitalize on its potential success in other parts of the world, and Harmony Gold attempted to do just that. At some unknown point in the mid-80s, they produced a pilot for an English-dubbed version of Dr. Slump, presumably sent out to potential broadcasters and investors. Clocking in at just under 18 minutes, this pilot consists of edited versions of the first 2 episodes, and abruptly ends with an unfinished credit sequence. Although Dr. Slump is widely considered a classic, it should make sense to anyone familiar with it why the English version was never picked up. The series can have quite a lewd sense of humor at times, and the pilot even still has remnants of that, despite having a bit of content cut out. This basically made it impossible to sell as a children's cartoon, and this was a time before cartoons like The Simpsons existed, so there really was no other market at the time. Despite Harmony Gold's ultimate failure with this license, that's not to say there isn't anything worth commending in this effort. For one thing, the voice acting is very well done, and it's one of the earliest roles of Bryan Cranston.
Oh, you need to see a dentist!
You just take some deep breaths and try to relax.
Also, the music is left intact, which was a pretty uncommon thing for anime dubs of the time. It seems like Harmony Gold were good sports in the end though, as later on they licensed Dragon Ball, and one of the movies they dubbed actually has a Dr. Slump crossover. Of course, that effort ended up being rejected too, but in the end I think we all know what America gravitated towards. In an ironic twist of fate, however, an anime called Saibot Robachi actually ended up getting an English VHS release, an anime that was primarily made to cash in on Dr. Slump's success in Japan. Technically, this counts as a reject too, since nothing more was made besides this one tape, but at least it had something released. It's crazy to think that after all this time, Dr. Slump is still technically rejected in the West, the original anime adaptation to be specific. The entire manga has been translated by Viz, and Discotek has released a few of the movies on DVD. Also, the 90s Slump anime is now streaming subbed officially on the Tubi service, but the original still remains unlicensed as of this video. Personally, I hope that changes someday, as it's a pretty fun series, but for now, we'll just have to keep waiting. In 1979, Toei produced an anime called Lun Lun the Flower Angel, an early magical girl series about the titular Lun Lun and her quest to find a magic flower. Each episode typically revolves around Lun Lun meeting a new person who has some kind of problem, and she uses her powers to help them resolve their issues and maybe also teach them a valuable lesson about human kindness. It's a pretty cute series and actually did find some success outside of Japan. In the US, however, the anime wasn't able to plant that many seeds. It was licensed by a company called Ziv International, and they only dubbed the first 4 episodes of the series and released them on VHS. However, what's really bizarre about this is that their dub of the first 2 episodes has a completely different voice cast from their dub of the 3rd and 4th episodes, the former being done by an unknown cast, and the latter being done by Jim Terry Productions of Force 5 fame. Not only that, but these 2 different dubs were simultaneously released on VHS by 2 different companies under 2 different names, the first one being released by Media Home Entertainment entitled Angel, and the second one being released by Family Home Entertainment titled The Flower Angel. The only thing that stays consistent in both releases is the soundtrack, which was rescored by Mark Mercury. I think the bizarre and nonsensical way in which this was released is primarily the reason no more episodes were dubbed, but it's also likely that it was just as simple as the tapes not selling enough copies to warrant continued production, which I think is a shame, because it would have been interesting to see a 3rd tape released under another label with another new title and voice cast to go along with it. Though our story doesn't end here, as Ziv wasn't ready to give up on Angel or the Flower Angel or whatever they're calling it this week. I mean, they even put out a vinyl record containing this dub's soundtrack. They really thought they had a hit on their hands. So when their attempts proved unsuccessful, they transferred their license to Harmony Gold. Harmony Gold took a different approach than Ziv, as they decided to compile the different episodes of the anime together to make a TV movie just called Flower Angel. No the. Supposedly this movie version actually aired on HBO a few times, but only got released on VHS in the UK. Also, I just want to point out that there's another UK VHS release called Angel Cloud. Clearly, nobody could agree on what this anime should be called in English, and the powers that be should have been locked in a room together until they could compromise on what to actually call it. I really think having consistent branding could have went a long way for this series. I'm not sure if it still would have been super popular, but at least people would know what they're watching if they wanted to find more of it. Alas, this series has still yet to receive any kind of full official English release, and remains inaccessible in the United States, though it is possible that somebody somewhere is working on an English DVD release or getting it thrown up on Crunchyroll. They're just probably stuck trying to figure out what to call it. It might be odd to see anything Doraemon related in this video, as he's such an iconic character, but in spite of its status, there's a lot of Doraemon media that has fallen into obscurity, like the 1973 series for instance, which is basically non-existent today. The 1979 series, however, was such a gigantic success in Japan that it ran for over 1,700 episodes up until 2005, spawning an endless supply of merchandise and being dubbed in several languages. At some point in the late 80s, Canadian-based company Cinar dubbed a number of episodes into English and reversioned it as The Adventures of Albert and Sydney. This was licensed in the United States by Turner Broadcasting, with every intention of being broadcast, but for some unknown reason it never showed up. It's been presumed that children felt the series was too esoteric despite the changes made, which ultimately led to the series being shelved. This entire version was almost completely hidden from the public, as the only evidence it even existed was it being listed on NATPE catalogs, but Albert and Sydney did actually have a limited broadcast in Barbados of all places, which is where any discussion of this dub online came from, as nobody thought to record it, and people seem to only be left with vague memories of it. However, it was such an obscure broadcast that some people thought it was actually fake, until the composer of the series came out and posted some excerpts on YouTube showcasing his work. Unless somebody is hoarding VHS recordings from Barbados, the chances of seeing more Albert and Sydney are slim to none. And despite Doraemon being more well known now, the large number of episodes in the 1979 series may make releasing it legitimately too daunting for most companies. Much like Doraemon, Minky Momo is also a pretty well-known anime across the world, which has generated a lot of revenue and licensor appeal. Kenny Lauderdale made an excellent video about the series that I recommend watching if you haven't already, so I won't repeat too much of what was said there. In the early 1980s, Harmony Gold bought the license to distribute Minky Momo in several countries, where they reversioned it as The Magical World of Gigi. It's not unusual for them to change names in their anime dubs, but it's worth noting that Gigi is actually the nickname of Harmony Gold's CEO Frank Agrama's daughter, and she also performs the voice in the English dub. Despite Harmony Gold dubbing a majority of Minky Momo into English, it never made it to US airwaves as, according to one of the producers, there was no space for low-budget productions in children's television. I'm not exactly sure what was meant by that though, as even though it's cheaper to dub anime than it is to produce original content, Minky Momo was pretty well revered at the time for its art and animation. I think the main problem was that even though it's also considered a children's show in Japan, there are different standards for what's appropriate for children over there, and Harmony Gold probably didn't think it was worth editing to appease the US market. In fact, other than the name changes and a new opening, this dub surprisingly has minimal editing. Since it couldn't be aired in the US, this dub was only known to be broadcast in Australia and Malaysia, only shown once and never to be seen again. Many years later, however, in a bizarre and cursed stroke of luck, William Winkler Productions temporarily acquired the license to Minky Momo from Ashi Productions and released Harmony Gold's entire dub in the form of compilation movies. These were available for purchase on Amazon for a very short amount of time, but it flew under everyone's radar, and unless you purchased every movie before they were delisted, it is impossible to watch this English dub in its entirety. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be mentioning it in this video. Going back to the late 80s though, Harmony Gold actually tried once more to bring Minky Momo to the US with the help of Carl Macek, who was responsible for their largely successful Robotech series. This time around, they took the 1985 OVA, LaRonde in My Dream, and turned it into a direct-to-VHS movie simply called The Magical Princess Gigi. But beyond that, nothing more of Minky Momo was ever brought out over here or even dubbed in English at all. Even though it hasn't happened yet, the chances of Minky Momo getting a full English release are actually pretty high when you consider how much of a meme parts of the anime have become, and that similar shows such as Creamy Mommy are now officially streaming on services like Retro Crush and Tubi, though maybe licensors are taking caution. Perhaps they don't want to invoke the curse of Minky Momo on themselves. Again, watch Kenny's video if you haven't already. Captain Future was a series of stories published in pulp magazines written by Edmund Hamilton, which chronicled the adventures of super scientist Kurt Newton in the far-off year of 1990. In 1978, a year after Hamilton's death, Toei created an anime adaptation which ran for 52 episodes and was licensed out to different countries with a decent amount of success. And you would think it would have no trouble coming to the US due to it being adapted from an American story, but unfortunately it seemed to fall under the radar. Ziv International licensed the series and dubbed 2 episodes that went straight to VHS by Media Home Entertainment, and then 2 more episodes that were released by Family Home Entertainment under the name The Adventures of Captain Future, with no relation to the previous release from Media and a different voice cast. It's presumed that these tapes were made with the intention of trying to sell the series to the US, but in the end, its legacy was reduced to being one of those weird trailers shown at the end of Gumby VHS tapes. A few years later, Harmony Gold licensed the series from Ziv to make a TV movie adapted from the first few episodes of the series, which only got a VHS release in the UK. Am I the only one getting a sense of deja vu? I'm not really sure what's preventing this series from getting licensed today. It has plenty of releases in other countries, so clearly there's no issue from the estate of Edmund Hamilton. I think it would just be hard to sell over here since it's not like a ton of people remember the books, and compared to other anime of its time, it doesn't seem like anything particularly special, so it might be too risky to bring out, but I wouldn't know, as I can't really watch much beyond what was actually dubbed. So that was a look at some rejected anime. Hopefully in the future this video ages poorly and all of these can be made accessible to those of us residing in the US. Feel free to leave some comments down below if you know of any other anime in a similar predicament, and be sure to share this video out with anyone who you think might find it interesting. Until next time, this has been FumeiCom, and be sure to stay away from any swarms of bees or trucks in the road.